Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. Well, this is a surprise episode that we're having, and it's entitled, we have some feedback there. Give us a second. Is everything okay? All right. Again, this episode is called When BS Hits the Fan, because a lot has happened in one day. So I was not even around. Usually on Wednesdays, I'm busy, I'm working, and I ended up going to a Broadway show. And when I came out, all of these messages were about what happened. And there was an article that came out, another Christopher Peak article on APM Reports entitled Lawsuit Calls Reading Curriculum Deceptive and Defective. And then there were other articles that came out as well in the Boston Globe and the Herald and all over the place. And essentially, it is a lawsuit that was brought about by families in Massachusetts, and it's a class action lawsuit. And they are suing Lucy Calkins. Yeah, we said it, Lucy Calkins, Irene Fontes, Gay Sue Pinnell, Heinemann Publishing. I believe Teachers College to some extent was brought into this, as well as HMH, because they are the parent company for Heinemann. So there's a lot to unpack here tonight. It's just going to be the two of us. And so I'm going to start off asking.
Faith, just welcome people to also type messages in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. If people want to make comments, if people want to say hello, if people want to say what they're feeling, anything goes.
Okay, cool. Yes, we want to hear from you because this is a really monumental development, because this has been talked about for years. And actually, before I start with Judy, I just want to give a shout out to Nancy Nancy, who is the executive director of the Decoding Dyslexia Massachusetts, because she has been at this for years. She and I have spoken numerous times, and good for you, because I know it's the families, but I know that you had a lot to do with that, Nancy. So shout out to you. All right, so let's get started. Judy, like I said, I wasn't even around when all...
There's a lot going on tonight, Faith. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Faith, when did this all start? When did we start messaging each other about all of this stuff? What happened? Tell the backstory of how it all started.
Well, the article
Remember yesterday was a crazy day, and all of a sudden you started texting me, and I was at work and I couldn't look at my phone. What was going on?
It was crazy. So I texted you after seeing some of this, and then I got emails, and I said, Judy, this is breaking news. We have to talk about this. This is just crazy. And like if anybody just came on now, we are going to be talking about this class action lawsuit.
Faith, you know a lot more took place yesterday than just this.
Like what? What do you want to talk about?
Well, you think you forgot already.
Well, tell me. Just go ahead. I can't guess.
Well, I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but remember I got an email about...
Oh, okay. Oh, on top of that, okay. So besides the class action lawsuit, in New York City, and obviously this doesn't pertain to everybody, but it kind of does, because if it's happening in New York, you know it's going to happen elsewhere. But there was an email that Judy received And it was started by the union in New York City because teachers are very
Not only I received it, I think everybody received it, and I actually saw it was going viral on social media yesterday.
Right. So this letter was going viral on social media, and apparently teachers have been very dissatisfied with the programs that were put into place. New York City had 3 programs to choose from that were all supposed to be evidence-based, knowledge building, reading curricula. And they're not happy because there's a lot that is involved in these programs. And as a way to kind of bargain to try to make teachers happier, so to relieve them of some of this paperwork, they now don't really have to keep track of data. And at least that was my understanding after reading this email, that perhaps some of the assessing, the assessments and the data collecting will not be a responsibility. So that's also an issue. So we're really talking about accountability here, accountability in terms of what, these gurus and balanced literacy are responsible for. And then we have people who are adopting curricula, and we're seeing that, people have to be accountable on this end too. So there's a lot to unpack here.
All right, I have one more thing I have to share with you, Faith. One more thing happened. You will not believe who I got an email from today.
Was it another Lucy email?
Yeah, the weirdest thing. So you would think it would slow down considering that all these articles are coming out. No, it doesn't stop. And I think I think some of the members on our chat tried to tell me how to disable it, but it came in today. I don't know, almost like it was just weird. At 5:16 p.m., it didn't go into my personal email. It went straight into my work-related email. It says it's from LC. We all know what that is. And it says December toolkits are here. It says you don't often get email from blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Considering that it says I don't often get email from that person, I've gotten more emails from that person than I have from my partner, Paul, this week. More emails, even more emails than I've gotten from you, Faith, this week.
Well, you know what? For those people who are joining us and missed this discussion, Judy had mentioned, I think in a couple of other episodes, maybe the last one, maybe the one before, it's been talked about that New York City school teachers are actually getting emails about Lucy Calkins' work and her programs. And you would think that some of this might have been filtered out. So nobody really knows how this is getting past anyone. But honestly, it's kind of amazing that that would come today after all of this broke loose with this class action lawsuit.
You know what? There's a Yiddish term. I don't know. A lot of our viewers probably don't speak Yiddish. I don't speak Yiddish.
Is it chutzpah?
It's chutzpah.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Judy, let's drink to chutzpah. So chutzpah means what nerve, all right? A lot of nerve to send out an email.
To play devil's advocate, I get a lot of emails from all kind of publishers pretty often. I don't know why that happens, but I just wish that somehow a big entity like, any Department of Education in general, just block it. Us teachers, we don't want to get this nonsense every day in our inboxes. So if you guys listen, IT people, please block all of us educators from getting emails from any publishers. We have enough to deal with. We know who's producing the good materials. We do not want to get emails every day about BS.
Okay, so then let's get into this lawsuit. Okay, let's start unpacking this a bit. So, class action lawsuit. All right. So, for those people unfamiliar with what this means, class action means a group, right? The class is the group. And so it's not one person suing, although there are lead plaintiffs. We're talking about bringing other people in because somehow all of the people here, we know why, they all feel they've suffered damages. And, they've suffered where they had to have kids not reading. They suffered because the services provided and the materials were supposed to be evidence-based, and they look at this as damaged goods and services. So that's what a class action lawsuit is. It has its pros, it has its cons. We'll talk about some of that tonight. Judy, you have something you want to share?
I've often seen these kind of lawsuits, like whether maybe you bought something and that there was a lawsuit for something, and it often seems like those kind of lawsuits don't really, I've heard rumors. I don't know, Faith, your husband's a lawyer, so maybe he knows more, or maybe you know more being married to a lawyer, that very often those kind of lawsuits don't really
have monetary gains.
Not big monetary gains. And I've often heard rumors, and I don't know if this is true because I have no legal background at all, that the people that profit the most from these kind of lawsuits are lawyers.
True. That is absolutely true. So that's one of the cons, right? So the issue is that most, I would say probably 3/4, if they win, that the attorneys get the bulk of it. And then let's say the 25% that, people win is shared with all of these people. So that could be thousands of people sharing in the 20%. It's not evenly distributed. The people who are the lead plaintiffs, clearly these two families would probably get much more than some of the other people who jumped in. So it's not like it's evenly distributed. The attorneys definitely get the bulk of it. And so if you're looking for a monetary gain here, it usually isn't with a class action lawsuit. However, there are reasons that people do this, and we need to talk about that, right? So with a class action lawsuit, what's there to gain? Well, we want to make sure that these people don't keep getting away with duping the public. That's number one. Judy, what are your thoughts?
I'll be honest, I was actually kind of shocked, to be quite honest. Faith, in general, I've never been one to really point fingers at one person in particular. It's always kind of like my pet peeve a little bit, actually, because I think this problem started for so many more reasons than just one person. I think it started with
you cut out, Judy. You just cut out.
You don't hear me?
You just what you said before. You said
I think that people were married to ideas and beliefs, and I really, really feel that way, Faith. From the bottom of my heart, I think.
Why? Why were they married?
Because I think people believed, even including the people in the lawsuit, I think that they believed that this was the best philosophy for children. And I think that initially people's hearts were not in the wrong place. Faith, I was one of those people. I was reading recovery, right? I was that person. And for a while, I mean, for 4 years of my life, probably maybe for 3.5 years, because I started to disbelieve more and more towards the end of my days in reading recovery. But, for a while, you really are thinking you're doing the right thing and that you're helping kids. But just in general, I think blaming just people.
Well, who then gets held accountable?
I think the publishing companies have to be held accountable.
And they're part of it, right?
I think this was very interesting, though, that these articles, I mean, Faith, there wasn't just 2 articles. As I Googled right before we jumped online today, there was at least 10 articles.
Oh, at least 10. Because this is really very different. Having a class action lawsuit with a reading.
Right. And very often when I heard about class action lawsuits before, it was like for ovarian cancer because of baby powder. You know, I might have heard about it from tobacco companies. You very rarely hear about class action lawsuits that are about literacy instruction. So I thought that was kind of like wild. I thought it was interesting that people's names were mentioned. It was interesting to see Fontes and Pinnell's names mentioned, because I feel like for a while they like slipped under the radar and all of a sudden their names were back in the article. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was also very interesting to see Heinemann's name in there. But what was even more interesting and kind of wacky and crazy for me, Faith, was Heinemann is part of HMH, and HMH is right now the hot ticket in a lot of the classrooms. So like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wrap my head around all of this. This is a lot.
Yeah, it seems a little incestuous, doesn't it? You know, that we had Heinemann, and then probably, at least in New York City, the number one program out of the three that they had a choice to choose from was HMH. And that's the parent company for Heinemann. So it's all very crazy here. But getting back to a few things you said, I think it's very interesting. So one of the things that will have to be proven is that they intentionally were deceptive, right? So, and that is, you know, kind of difficult to prove. And I think that's why it's so important that teachers participate. Now, for those of you that don't know, there is a Google Doc that is going around, and it is called Testimonials from Teachers Trained in Balanced Literacy, where teachers could add in their experiences, because stories are important, right? You know what? I wrote a whole book about my story and my experiences firsthand. But obviously, I'm not the only one out there. There are lots and lots of teachers who have stories. So there's stories. Judy, you said that you saved all of your books, all of your materials. I didn't. I had a little bonfire with my handouts, and I
didn't, because there were some things that I know that I did in the past that I still feel are deeply aligned with the science, evidence, and research. Now, there's some things, if I go down into my basement, I could laugh at them now. Okay. That is true. I haven't thrown them out. Now, am I tempted to all of a sudden turn in all these documents? I guess, Faith, what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, and I think you and I spoke on the phone last night, is what is the goal of this? Is the goal to try to make sure that these programs and these methods are never in classrooms again?
That's number one.
Is the goal for these people to be held liable so that they stop producing their materials? Is the goal to punish people? Is the goal to make sure no more kids suffer? What I wish we would.
There were parents who like had to take out a second mortgage on their homes to send their kids to private school or tutoring or a combination of both. And so clearly they are looking for compensation. But as I said, with a class action lawsuit, it's very iffy. I hope that happens. But to be realistic, a lot of times people get very little when it's broken down in these class action lawsuits. But I think there's a more important reason. We want to hold people accountable. You know, it was like the Wild West, where people could say anything they want. They put this in the schools. People were brainwashed. I was brainwashed before I knew better. We all were brainwashed. You know, the school districts were told that this was the right thing to do. And then coming from Columbia University, come on, wouldn't you?
I can't believe you just mentioned that. Columbia University's name was mentioned in the articles. So Correct. Are they part of the lawsuit as far as you understand?
I think that TC, Teachers College, is, I don't know, in a small way, a big way, but they were mentioned. At least that's what I saw. So, I know that when we were all looking to TC for answers, we're like, well, come on, this is out of Columbia University. This has to be the best. People think Ivy League, it has to be the best. And, it's really about duping the public. It's about accountability. And it's about improving, quality control. Because what does the little guy have? Think about it. What accountability does that average parent have? Not much. I know so many parents that try to fight and get justice here. And sometimes they did win, but as mentioned in the article, it was kept quiet. Like, okay, we'll settle with you. And so they would settle. Maybe they would cover the cost of a private school if you were able to, show damages. Great. But then in the end, that wasn't what was presented to the public. So this was this dirty little secret that was sitting with maybe an elite group of people who got maybe compensated for this, but most people did not know, and it did not really get out there. So that's, you asked about that, but so I think it gives voice to the little guy. I mean, that's part of it, right? Giving voice to the little guy. It's really so much more than monetary compensation.
I think so too. You know what else really struck me about all the articles, the pattern that I noticed? I think one of the biggest things that I noticed, Faith, was what was problematic to the parents that pursued the lawsuit, as far as I understood, was that these programs were being touted or promoted as evidence and research based, when in fact they weren't. I mean, did they not have?
They will still stand by that. I think they still believe that there is research behind it, even though there's all types of research. I could say anything is research based. Oh, we had a research study, but that doesn't mean that it has true evidence. Also, we know that there are small sample sizes. We also know there could only be a couple of different studies. But when you look at the big picture, which we have to look at here, no, there's not the kind of evidence that would say that this is the way to go. But
I think that's a very important message moving forward, right? Because right now, I think, a lot of new companies are emerging, or old companies are, saying they're science aligned, or they're SOR, or they're research based, or they're evidence based. And I hope that seeing this unravel, that companies and publishers and everybody in general will be more careful when they put on labels, or they share research, or they don't share research. I hope this is I think this lawsuit will be a wake-up call to a lot of people so that they are more careful when they're doing these things. So Faith, do you think the way to move forward is that people reach out to researchers consistently, or do they reach out to a lawyer consistently? Like, how do people make sure that they're not just saying this is evidence-based or this is research-based? Because Faith, through every episode of The Literacy, we've learned that even if some of these programs seem to have elements of being research-based, there's no way in hell, as we've been speaking about on every episode of The Literacy View, every task is research and evidence-based. So how do we move forward? What's going to happen, Faith? That people are just going to pursue lawsuits all the time, or like?
That's a good question. No, that's a very good question, because I think that that's part of the problem. We think that this problem only exists for balanced literacy. But we're seeing now the problems are existing as they get these new programs that we don't even know if these programs are the answer. And as we know, this past year, the scores in New York City went down. So, and I can't speak for other places, but, and again, you have to give things time, right? So, I don't want to jump and say, well, it's terrible because look, the scores went down, but it does show you that maybe we're moving too quickly to jump on just a different bandwagon. So the answer is, I think we have to really go a little bit deeper, move a little bit slower, maybe do things in a way where we try to set up a sample study, maybe only take a few schools and see how they do before implementing it in, a whole city. So, I think there are a lot of lessons here to be learned from just this lawsuit.
Okay, but going back to my question, I almost feel like I wish we had John McGrath back, our lawyer friend, and maybe other lawyer friends will chime in after,
Maybe John is watching.
I hope he told me he's binging. So, basically, like, do we all have to walk on eggshells now as we develop these new programs, or we put new programs on the market? Like, how does it all work, Faith? I really, I'm speaking honestly, I don't really, it's not like I'm going to lose sleep worrying about what expeditionary learning and HMH and Wit and Wisdom does tomorrow. I'm not going to lose sleep over it, right? But they should be losing sleep over it, because a lot of people, honestly, because now clearly we're holding more people accountable, and we're holding people accountable every day. I mean, podcasts, Sold a Story, The Literacy View,
social media, decoding dyslexia groups. The parents have been really powerful in this movement. I say it all the time. The parents, and clearly this is parent driven right now. So here's another thing to think about. And this was in the article, and I mentioned this way before the article came out. Because
articles, which one are you referring to?
So this article that came out, the Christopher Peak article, I believe they mentioned that that schools have to pay after Lucy made some adjustments to units of study. Instead of just trying to correct the matter and making sure that the schools got the right instruction in, schools were being charged to get retrained with new materials. And that's outrageous. And the example they used is, if a car has been recalled, do we make the victim pay? No, they just take care of the matter. And so that is problematic right there. And I said that a while ago. Like, when I saw this.
Wait, Faith, I got to give a cheers. You hit it on the money. And it's funny. I've been looking at social media a little bit today after work and after tutoring. And that seems to be something that pissed off a lot of people, that there came a point when, even if it started off as being belief systems, when people knew they may have gotten some things wrong. And then new materials were being published. But instead of saying, here's a revision, here's a new version, cha-ching, cha-ching, people were being charged again. And you know what? As it was happening, I was crossing my fingers and really praying and hoping that those materials would be free, but they weren't free. The revisions weren't free. And unfortunately, that I had issue with a little bit, because people made money again. So we got it wrong. Not me. It wasn't me. But a lot of people got it wrong. A lot of publishers got it wrong. I don't like to talk about people, because I think the problem was a whole system.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying. I'm going to stop you there, okay? Because I know you keep saying you don't like to talk about people. And obviously, we're not looking to, really focus on one person. However, how do you avoid not talking about these three individuals? because they are absolutely entwined in the mess. It's their company. They are the ones who are making millions and millions of dollars, and off the backs of kids and off the backs of schools. So I don't see how we could not mention their names. If there's a lawsuit, somebody has to be accountable. You know how they say the buck stops here? Well, if you don't mention a person, who is then accountable? Right? You have to have some accountability. And that seems to be the problem now. I think on both sides. If we get rid of data and we get rid of assessing because there's a lot of paperwork and a lot, well, then how do you prove that there's progress? There needs to be accountability everywhere, right?
Faith, I got to stop you. We have Laura O'Brien. Hi, Laura. She's asking you a question. Here's what my school is struggling with. How do we weigh the importance of getting it right versus the time and the urgency? What do you think, Faith?
That's a great question. So here's what I think. And I say this a lot with anything, not just reading. You know what? You got to be quick to get things out when you know it's wrong, but then you have to take your time to really research to do it right. You don't want one mistake on top of another. And I think that was the big mistake here. We allowed influencers and other people out there to make the decisions quickly. And I know that the states were putting pressure on doing this quickly, but here's the problem. We rushed, we didn't vet, we didn't do the homework, we didn't test things out with a pilot program. That is problematic. So I understand what we're saying. There is a sense of urgency to help kids and to do the right thing. But on the other hand, if we don't really invest in teachers and train teachers properly, and we just think the program does the work, we're going to end up with a bigger mess on our hands, an expensive, big mess.
And that's why I think on the literacy view, we've stood firm. And I think Faith and I, we're not always 100% united, but very often we are. But I think we both stood very united in feeling that pedagogy and your knowledge of what's important, how to teach it, what does explicit instruction look like, is so much more important than buying into certain programs. You know what? Programs come and go. Today, your school might be doing this program. Tomorrow, your principal might wake up and say, we're not doing this program anymore. However, if you really understand what it means to teach a kid how to read based on the science and of literacy, and you really know what it means to teach a child how to write based on the newest evidence and research, it doesn't matter what program your principal buys. You will make it work. You will know what to do. And I'm going to give an example that might make some people uncomfortable, but I'm going to speak my truth. A few years back, I was coaching in a school that was in a transition stage, and they were actually still using TC Faith. It wasn't the program I chose, but that's what, the card I was given. And for the rest of their literacy block, they had a strong phonics program and they had a strong phonemic awareness program. Okay, so it wasn't perfect, but we immediately made some shifts. We didn't allow kids to use picture power. There was no picture power. Regardless of us having that program in the building, it was immediately shifted to say, hey, we're looking at the word and we're going to decode and make those sounds. So yes, was it perfect? No. But because I knew what was important, which was not looking at the pictures, which was looking at the words, we made it work. Was it the most efficient system that we had in place? Absolutely not. But that's the honest reality. A lot of teachers, Faith, they don't get to choose what their principal decided to do. And I'll tell you something, Faith. I think it is important for teachers to say, hey, what we're using right now is not aligned. And I do think it's unfortunate because I do still work with private clients, and it hurts my heart when I have students that are at risk for dyslexia and I find out that their intervention is a program like LLI, which is not helpful for kids that have dyslexia and so forth, it's a problem. I don't know, Faith. It's a
Tell
mess.
you some of my experiences. So a few years ago, I was called into a district here on Long Island, and we were, talking about evidence-based practices, and they were really making a concerted effort to get in the right instruction. But as I walked through classrooms, I saw all the posters on the wall with Skippy Frog and friends, all the things that say to skip a word and do all this stuff. The posters were right there. So I asked and I said, I know you're making an effort to do this. Why are those posters still hanging in the classroom? You're sending out mixed messages. And I don't think, obviously, it was done on purpose, but clearly there are a lot of misunderstandings, and old habits are hard to break, especially if people don't have that deep knowledge. They think that balancing everything is better than, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And some of that is true, but you have to know which bathwater is clean and which bathwater is dirty.
But you know what? I have to play devil's advocate. I have to do it.
Okay.
I think the people that are really, really strong proponents of SOR and all the research and evidence have to be held to the same standard. There have been instances, I'm not going to name names. I am not. There have been instances where research has changed, and there were certain things that were being done in structured literacy that were also found not to be strongly aligned.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And the evidence. And unfortunately, on multiple occasions,
it's still happening.
Yeah. People remain silent, and they think it's okay not to say, hey, we got something wrong. So we should hold everybody to the same standard.
I'm going to give you a cheers for that one.
Correct. And I'll give you more. I'm going to talk about something that I'm seeing in the field. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We had an episode on the Literacy View about sound walls a while back. We had Jan Wasowick on, and we had Ken Appel on, right, Faith? And they told us about the research and evidence and what is strongly supported by research and evidence and what is not. And the research didn't have a strong support for 1 million mouths on the sound wall. And yet all the guidance that I see from everybody and their mother, whether it be unions, whether it be school districts, everybody and their mother has seemed to miss the boat on it. And it's almost like propaganda, Faith. It's unbelievable.
And what about the, the PA in the dark stuff? So that's another issue. So I think what you hit on was so important, that we have to be very careful to own up to things, because it's very easy for people to turn around and say, look, this is happening or that's happening. You have to.
Faith, what do we do when people don't own up? Like, what do we do?
Well, again, as an individual, there's very little you can do. You could do what we're doing. We could talk about it and make people aware of the problem. I do think that the reason we even see a class action lawsuit is because now people are educated. They're more knowledgeable, so that they can look at things and say, well, this looks like it is, deceptive advertising. This looks like it's faulty marketing. How else would people know that unless they had a knowledge base? I'm hoping that my books added to that knowledge base. Obviously, Sold a Story did that, right? So I think that we have to realize that we have to all be honest. When we see BS, we have to, Judy, do you have your BS button? We have to call BS, whether it's That's right. We have to call BS.
Guys, if you see me looking down on this episode, it's because I'm trying to sift through the comments that are coming in and so forth. Faith, one more from our same viewer. So much difficulty with schools getting rid of resources when there is nothing supplied to replace them. How do we tell teachers to get rid of leveled books, which I do see a lot less of in the field? I see people repurposing their level books a lot more for kids that can read, and I see a lot less of the level A, B, C, and D. But how do we tell teachers to get rid of level books in the early reading stages if there is no replacement of decodable books? What do teachers do then?
Laura O'Brien, you are on fire tonight. Well, that is a great question. If school districts are not ordering what's needed, what are they going to do? Teachers need to use something. They want to give kids something to read, right? So I think it's then up to the teachers to start trying to print out decodable passages and those types of things until they are able to order the books. But you know what? There's power in numbers, Laura. So the same way this class action suit shows there are power in numbers to try to, make people accountable. Well, teachers have to group together and say, this is what we need to do the job. And here's why. And here's the evidence. And it shouldn't be one teacher doing this because we know teachers get punished. We had that episode about teachers are getting punished when they open their mouths, right? So again, people could go back. I don't know which number it was, but it's really hard for one teacher to stand up. So we encourage people to talk to each other. We encourage people to have these conversations. I encourage people to take a look at our latest guest, Zach Rochelle's book, right, about explicit instruction. He was a great guest and talking about pedagogy. All the things in his book are what we're talking about, right? That if people did these types of things, regardless of program, it would help. It would improve instruction right there. These are evidence-based practices.
Faith, well, you know what I'm afraid of? And we've been talking about it on the Literacy View for a couple of episodes as well. So you mentioned something a little while ago that the data slipped in certain places. I don't want to reemphasize where, but I'm sure it slipped in many places. And change takes time, right? Now, I keep getting emails from our friend, right? If what happens if our data doesn't shift for a while? What if we all of a sudden lose steam? I'm terrified. I don't want to lose steam. I don't think we will because I think data will go up. I know my data is shifting. I have to give out a shout out to my teachers at my school. Our data is shifting. And the biggest way you can know if your data is shifting is start progress monitoring. This is a great time of year to progress monitor before that middle of the year benchmark. Start setting those goals. But what are we going to do? What if there's going to be a year 2 state tests come, scores don't go up? What happens then is I'm not going to say her name.
Well, look, things don't happen quickly in a lot of places, right? It really depends on leadership. It really depends on teacher buy-in. It really depends on teachers being well-trained in whatever is being given to them and that they have deep understanding of what they're doing. If those numbers are not shifting over time, like you can't just, like I said before, yes, it fell after 1 year, but we can't condemn people for that, right? But 4 years, 5 years, it shouldn't take that long to see improvement. That's, really excessive. We have to start looking at what's going on here and trying to really get granular about what's happening.
Faith, what do you think? So how many years do you think, in your professional opinion, you've been doing this for a while, I've been doing this for a while, how many years in general do you think it should take to start, if you are instructional core program is working well? How many years do you think it should take to start seeing some sustainable changes? And then we have some more comments coming in the chat, which is kind of fun too.
3 to 5 years. So when I was with Reading First, they talked about sustainability, and it had to be really at least 3 years, but 5 years, that's very telling. At that point, that 5-year mark, unfortunately, you have to really be in this for the long haul. And people right away throw their arms up and they're like, this isn't working, SOR is BS, or, whatever they're going to say. I remember that was something that we talked about. So there really needs to be consistent support. It's not enough just to do a one and done PD. You see that all the time. There needs to be continuous coaching, a continuous evaluation. You mentioned data. I'm afraid that with that union letter that you had shared with me, that they're going to kind of loosen the reins with some of that. And then how can anyone be held accountable?
All right. So that's funny you mentioned it. So listen, I appreciate my union. I have deep respect for all the benefits that I get because of my union, the wonderful career that I have, the wonderful profession that I have. However, I really feel that data is very important. I think children are very important. I don't think you could run a program well without continuous data and progress monitoring. But you know what? I thought about it last night. If you have a good administration, Faith, which I think many schools do, they'll make time for their teachers to have time to enter their data. If the teachers are stressed out, they will make time for teachers to progress monitor. I'll give an example and a shout out to my own building. I'm going to give out a shout out.
But then why are all these teachers so upset? It's not happening everywhere. I mean, I'm glad it's happening for you, but it's not.
But maybe more people have to speak about their administrations that are going above and beyond. I want to give out a shout out to my administrator in my building, Pauline Scalisi. If you're listening out there, thank you for giving my team time today to progress monitor. Teachers were given extra prep time. We were setting goals. We were progress monitoring kids. We didn't progress monitor everybody because we know we don't have time.
So then the lesson here is, listening to you, that there needs to be some protected time to do this paperwork. And it's very important, and to have articulation. So it's not just enough to check a box, to tick a box that, oh, we did these tests. If you're not really looking at it and you're not really interpreting the data correctly, then it becomes a big waste of time. And maybe teachers are feeling that way.
And I think that was a missed opportunity from the union. I think that instead of fighting to do less of less, the fight should be to give teachers the ample amount of time, because there's no way it's okay for teachers not to consistently collect, analyze, and use data to drive instruction. There is no way that you can be an effective teacher without progress monitoring, seeing how your kids are doing, and creating action plans, setting goals for students to drive instruction. And Faith, you said something on many episodes, and I don't think it really hit me as clearly as it did when this article came out from the union. You said the unfortunate truth is that teachers have unions, which I'm very blessed to have, but students don't have unions. Who's fighting as hard for the students besides the teachers and the parents?
100%. So just so people are aware, the union serves its constituents. And that's the job of a union, and that's great. But in this mess, on both sides, the victims are the kids. Let's look at that. The kids are the victims. So I am really hoping that this class action suit, I mean, it would be great if some people could benefit, to get compensated for some of this. But I hope that this is really more about, making a point of keeping people accountable. And, many people experienced damages in this. Kids and families and the money they had to shell out. So I do think that it's really about trying to get a message out there, making a point so that this doesn't keep happening. And I really bravo to the people doing this. And I'll remind people again, teachers, there is this this Google Doc out there. If you want to be a part of it and you want to contribute, remember, we have a moral obligation. That's how I look at this. You might say, well, what do I benefit from being a part of this? My feeling is that we should have a moral obligation. When we see wrong, we call it out. That's how I feel. And we should be.
All right, Faith, I got to interrupt you because there's a couple of important comments and messages. So we have Nancy Duggan making a very important clarification. And I think it's an important clarification that she wants me to reiterate to our viewers today. And I think you mentioned her name before.
I gave her a shout out at the beginning of the show. Nancy,
okay.
You're not upset.
Where I go. There's a couple of people I want to shout out and mention their comments. So just to clarify, the Massachusetts lawsuit is not particularly about teachers and practices, but about publishing and professional development that was promoted as experts who admittedly ignored or were ignorant what experts should and could know. A product case like this is about how it's promoted and marketed and if it is misleading.
Yes. And that's what I was saying, misleading, faulty marketing, deceptive, advertising, damaged goods, whatever you want to say. It's really, the kids and the schools and the teachers, those are the consumers, right? And if you're marketing to the consumers and this is, it's problematic, that's what we want to get to the bottom of here.
All right, a couple more. So we have Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Thank you so much. Sandy's comment of the day, she said the key is for teachers to buy in. So teacher buy-in, she feels, is a critical part of shifting, right? And I think that's what's going to happen for a lot of the administrators that don't believe. Once you see your teachers in the field, once you see more kids learning how to read, there will be more buy-in. And I once again say pedagogy is key. Hi, Ruth Rosenberg. She wrote that is the key. Teacher knowledge is imperative, not programs. Teacher knowledge is more important. Thank you so much to Sandy Morris. She said, preach it, girls.
So I'm
got a lot of support here tonight, Faith. We have so many people. Artie, thanks for joining. And we have a whole bunch more. Faith, let me ask you one last question. I know we're wrapping up by 7:59. Remember we had another episode with John McGrath about a lawsuit. How is that lawsuit different than this lawsuit?
You're talking about the reading recovery one?
Yeah.
So, well, I don't think that was brought about by parents. I don't think it was families suing. I don't think there was, I don't know the exact differences, but that was something that I think was brought about, like suing the state for still having reading recovery in the schools. I don't think it was suing people and publishing companies. I think it was a little bit different.
It's interesting. The other thing that's really interesting that's happening, and Faith and I have spoken about this a multitude of times on the Literacy View, is, a lot of these programs were written onto state laws, and some of them weren't field tested for so long. Did we make a mistake by rushing to put things down on these documents rather than, really seeing how much evidence, how many years of, good data they had? Because, at the end of the day, now we have it on state legislation. I think it actually says certain names of certain programs, Faith, right?
Well, you know what? I think that's what they were talking about. Like reading recovery was not added to the list of approved programs a while ago. And then they came back, and now it's still a fight to try to get.
But I think now it's a slippery slope, and people have to be very careful. And I think it comes back to an episode that we had with Nate Joseph, who said, and I don't want to misquote him, but he was like, maybe we should have put certain pedagogy moves that should not be allowed in classrooms, like cueing, banned.
Yes, so right. He was talking about removing, and that's what I said before, removing poor practices before rushing to jump into something that you don't have enough information about. That's what I was saying.
All right, we have another comment. Faith, it's getting a little exciting. I know we're wrapping up, but we have Gina that just came on the air. She said, dangerous precedent. What about the principals and districts? What about the teachers? Teacher knowledge is key. A good teacher can teach a kid to read regardless of the program. Then we have Lindsay on board, pedagogy practices. Faith, it's really amazing to see. And we're not, soliciting. We're not telling people what to say. We just literally jumped on the air, and a lot of people.
Because I do think that teachers feel like there's something wrong here. They know. They really do know. Their hands are tied often, but they know. At least the majority of them do. I'm going to wrap up here. So my last thoughts are, I'm wondering if they're going to settle or admit guilt. Like, I want to know, how this is all going to play out. But just to let people know out there, a class action lawsuit takes years. It's a long, long, long process, very long. So if people are expecting this to happen quickly, it doesn't. So we'll see how all this plays out. But this was a fascinating discussion. Thank you for joining us on the Literacy View. I think there'll be a lot more discussions about this to come. But I'm glad we had this breaking news episode.
Yep. And Faith, just one more. Nancy also linked in the chat, and I think it'll stay on for a while. Reading Recovery sues Ohio on the ban on cueing and literacy. Right.
So that was, with the state involved. This is a little bit different. And I've never seen anything like this before, because there were lawsuits, the right to read lawsuits were out there, but this is just a very different situation.
I think my biggest takeaway is be careful. Lawsuits are happening. Be responsible, be careful, do your research. Don't just say something's evidence-based if it's not evidence-based. And I think my biggest lesson is communicate with researchers and talk to them. I think that's been one of the biggest things about the Literacy View. We're trying to bridge that communication gap between teachers and researchers, and there has to be that continuous line of communication. And I thank everybody. That's it. So,
and just a reminder, once again, if you missed it, there is this Google Doc going around. If you are a teacher, this is your opportunity. If you have the materials, books, any stories to share, get moving, because you know what? They're going to need to hear from lots and lots and lots of teachers. I, for one, would be very happy to share my experiences. Not that it will do me personally any good, but it's for the greater good. So let's leave it at that. Okay.
All right. We're changing lives one view at a time. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.